Hello and welcome to the second episode of History Bubble, Azerbaijan. Last we left the state of Shirvan controlled northern Azerbaijan, while the Turkish Kara and Akkonkulu controlled the south. But after many years of conflict, Akkonkulu came on top and destroyed Kara. This, along with the Timurids, threatened Shirvan greatly, and they sought to ally themselves with the Russians or Ottomans, but Shirvan allied themselves with Ak, as no other power seemed to want to protect them. Not be able to fight with them and defeat a Timurid invasion, the Shirvan Shahs lost more and more power to Akkonkulu every year until they become their vassal. When the leader of the Safavid order, Sheikh Hadar, who had formerly failed to attack Shirvan, was to go to the northern Caucasus to jihad against the Sunnis, Haidar saw a possibility to take on Shirvan as they had gotten access to the land. Haidar pillaged the country and put the capital under siege. But Shirvan eventually managed to successfully send for aid, and a large coalition of local lords managed to drive Haidar off. But Haidar's son Ismail managed to escape captivity and take the Shirvan capital, and most of eastern Ak followed all of Persia, and Shirvan was now a Persian vassal. As the Ottomans expanded east, Shirvan tried to declare their allegiance to them instead, but the attempt was crushed. During the following years, Shirvan was slowly being annexed as a full part of the Safavid Empire, while the unruliness of Shirvan was crushed. But with each subsequent Ottoman invasion, the former rulers of Shirvan tried to help, and after many defeats they eventually got captured by the Ottomans, but got even less autonomy under them than under the Safavids. The Ottomans were not able to hold on to the eastern Caucasus for a long time. It was during the Safavids' rule that Azeri identity in the region started to flourish, as the centuries of Turkish occupation and incursion into the area started to enact a major influence, and a mix of it created the Azeri language and identity, especially as the Safavid moved their center further and further from Azerbaijan. Their own regional identity started to flourish. By the early 1700s, the Safavid power started to decrease as many wars with the Ottomans and Afghan incursion started to wear them down. Russia was also waiting for a good opportunity to acquire Persian Caucasus, as they had conquered the northern Caucasus and were afraid that the Ottoman invasion might take it. So the Tsar, Peter I, started to build up an army and prepare for invasion. They started to occupy northern Azerbaijan, when it a few years later started to seem that a Safavid revival was occurring and an army assembling, so the Russians had to abandon the South Caucasus. Azerbaijan after this, and for a time before, was divided into many tiny khanates subordinate to the Safavids, but soon after Russia had occupied Georgia, they marched in and occupied all of the southeast Caucasus from the newly formed Qajar dynasty, which knew they would not win and so did not put up that much of a resistance, and gave up most of the South Caucasus, which divided Azerbaijan for all future. With the Russian conquest and the construction of the Transcaucasian Railway, Baku started to grow quickly, which after the destruction of the former Shirvan capital became the de facto capital of the Azerbaijani Khanates. But Iran and Turkey did not like the Russian expansion into territories they formerly had their jurisdiction on, so invaded at roughly the same time to try to take back the former lands, but the Russians drove them back and won the war. But this did not stop Iran, as a few years later, with endorsement from some Western powers, invaded again, but were promptly beaten and had to abandon Nakhchivan. Even at this time, in the middle of the 19th century, where the Azeri Turkish identity fully formed, as the many smaller khanates had slightly different identities, and not all of them were Turkish, but more Persian in language. But the khanate structure was gradually abolished in favor of a Russian system, with occasional revolts, and started to bring together the South Caucasus Muslim into a common identity. Baku also saw a huge boom as oil was found, and started a large industry, which prompted a large Russian immigration wave, with a lesser Armenian one, to the area. It also brought prosperity to Azerbaijan, and schools and infrastructure were greatly expanded, bringing the area closer together. This led to many new ideas of national identity, pan-Islamism and pan-Turkishness coming into Azerbaijan, with an initiative from the Kazan, a pan-Islamic Russian Congress, to discuss Muslim issues in Russia, But even with this being allowed in the Duma semi-parliament, reduced the amount of seats awarded to Muslims. In the late 1800s, Baku almost doubled its population to provide the oil for the growing Russian industry, while most of the oil profit went to foreign enterprise. A few small local Azeri and Armenian ventures brought some wealth to the region, but this was only for the upper classes, and as the low labor rights in Russia made the work extremely hard, the oil and mineral industry, which the workers have next to no right, which prompted many strikes in the area, which in 1904 became so large that Russia had to sign a deal increasing workers' rights. This also prompted the Azeri peasants into protests and semi-rebellions. They still worked under the feudal system, which was finally revoked in 1912. But the area was still quite unruly for the Russians, with a large amount of banditry and illegal activities, which were countered by the state violence, while most of this was fairly unorganized. There was large massacres and armed conflict between Armenians and Azeris during the first decade of the new century. In 1914, just before the World War, another revolt occurred, with the socialists in the lead, which was crushed and moved the socialists underground. In the First World War, a few Azeris participated, but as Muslims were excluded from conscription. But a few still fought, but some Muslim volunteer regiments. While the Russian Empire collapsed into the February Revolution, the Caucasus now needed to decide how to handle it. Azerbaijan considered forming a union with other Muslim Caucasus nations, but instead soon being put into the Trans-Caucasian Committee with Georgia and Armenia. But what this will entail, and the first independent Azeri state, will be explored next time on History Bubble Azerbaijan.